A very big shout out to eSpace Productions who very kindly provided the thumbnail for this video. You can check out his DeviantArt portfolio in the description. Hello, it's Lord Slaw here, come back in another video, and the topic of today's is what makes a good Cyberman story. So I did this for the Daleks a while back, and I feel like it's just fair I do it to the Cybermen, as they've been treated really badly on screen, at least in the way that they've been portrayed. It doesn't really fit what originally made them effective in the first place, or, in line with the intentions Kit Piddler had when he created them, which is a real shame, because there isn't even really a story that gets it all right. Like with Dalek, you have Power of the Daleks and Dalek. However, with the Cybermen, it doesn't really have an equivalent of those. There's a lot of episodes which tick some of these boxes and get close to doing a really good, really well-made Cybermen story where they're portrayed to the point where you're really effectively done, but nothing ticks all the boxes, unfortunately. So I think today I'm going to go in to talk about what would make a truly good and effective Cyberman story. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the designs. The designs are very important in portraying the Cybermen effectively. The optimum way to do this is to have bits that remind you that they're still human or humanoids. The best example is the 10th Planet Cybermen, how they've still got human hands, and they've still got the outline of a human face that's just covered by surgical tape. Or even with the 80s Cybermen, how they have silvery foily mouths which you can see inside their helmet moving up and down. That's creepy, and that's what works really well. It's a constant reminder that these people were like us, but in their desperation to survive and not die, they removed what originally made them human or humanoid in the first place. They removed their emotions. That's what they are. They're not robots, and the New Who designs, that's my big problem with them, that's what makes them less effective, is they look like robots, and it just does not work as well as it originally intended to do for that reason. Because there's no reminder there's no point to them, they're just, another sci-fi robot, unlike the originals, which were this scary thing about the progress of technology and the dangers it might have. So the next thing to talk about would be the personality of the Cybermen, and that sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but let's just go with it. So one problem I think a lot of writers have is portraying the Cybermen a lot more like robots than they should do. A good example of this would be in the Age of Steel, when the 10th Doctor and his ilk are surrounded by a group of Cybermen, and he uses his sonic screwdriver to make them go away, as he would manipulate any other machine in the Doctor Who universe. This really doesn't work, especially in the context of what the Cybermen are meant to be. They're meant to be like us, just with their emotions removed. They're not meant to be just robots. They still have their independent thought. They're still independent. They can still think for themselves. Just the difference is they're in these botched bodies and have no emotions. That's the difference there. That's clearly misunderstanding the Cybermen, and it's not very creepy when you can just, get the magic wand, wave it at the evil metal men, and then they just walk away. It really diminishes the fear factor that the Cybermen bring, portraying them like robots and having them defeated like that. On the other end of the spectrum, however, there's a lot of problems with giving the Cybermen too much emotion, because they are meant to be emotionless. And one story, well, not just one story, kind of a whole era that suffers from this is the 70s and 80s Cybermen, where a lot of them seem like they do have emotion, and it really doesn't work, because it's just obvious that the Cybermen aren't meant to be like that. They're constantly referred to as emotionless killers, so it really baffles me when they do that. Not a particularly evil race either. They're only doing what they deem necessary to survive, and are only spreading what they think is for the ultimate benefit of everybody. Of course, from our perspective, we think they're wrong and we think they're doing some really bad stuff, but the point is, from their perspective, they're not really doing it maliciously. They're not trying to make us suffer, that's the point. And I think that's highlighted quite well in Moonbase Episode 3, when they say that they're only doing it to remove threats, whereas somebody accused them of doing it purely for revenge. And then they say they don't have feelings, and they call it a weirdness that we have, which I think really highlights something which isn't explored enough in the fact that Cybermen must find us really weird. In the Moonbase novelisation, I believe the Cybermen also refers to humans as retarded, which from their perspective makes absolute sense, because obviously we act in these very strange ways to somebody who doesn't have emotion, in the same way that somebody who has, mental issues, we might think that they act weirdly. It's in the same kind of vein, and I think that works really well at highlighting the Cybermen are like us, but they've got got that difference, and they consider themselves superior to us, and I think that's something that's really well done and should be implemented into Cybermen stories. Having some very sinister threats is something which can be quite good as well for the Cybermen. It's not necessary, but it's something which can add quite nicely. The example I'm talking about here is in the Moonbase episode 3, when the Cyberman says to Ben and Polly, if they leave the room, they will be converted. Not they will be killed, or they will be, thrown back in or tortured or anything. They will be converted. It's a very simple threat, and to their perspective, isn't even anything bad, but it's just all the more horrifying to the audience and to the characters that I think it works really effective in hammering home what the Cybermen are about, and I wish that kind of thing would be done a little more. Another good point to bring up is their disgusting factor. That should really be played in more episodes, as that significantly adds to what makes them so uniquely creepy and horrible and just disturbing to the audience. A good example of this would be the 10th Planet Cybermen, how you can still see parts of their human limbs, or the fact that they've got surgical tape around their face, which is clearly hiding all sorts of horrible botched scars where they've been augmented. Other good examples would be like in Earthshock, where you can kind of see this bumpy silvery lip left over from all of the augmentation, all of the mechanical parts which have been added to it. I mean, it's just horrible. Another good example would be in the Silver Turk, where the 8th Doctor describes the Cybermen as having a smell of antiseptic. It's so disgusting, clinical and medical, and it really hammers home what the Cybermen are about. That's what makes them creepy. That's a really good thing to do it, and it doesn't even need to stop there. There's some other good stories which do it in different ways, like for example the death scenes of the Telosian Cybermen in the Moonbase and Tomb of the Cybermen, and also the deaths of the Cybermen in the Five Doctors. All of this horrible pus and gore comes out of their chest units and their mouths when they die, and it looks disgusting, it looks foul, but that's what works about the Cybermen. That's what makes them so creepy. That's what keeps people on edge, and that should really be implemented in more stories. They're far too clean nowadays. There was one good part in The Rise of the Cybermen, or was it the Age of Steel? It was the Age of Steel, where they go through the insides and there's bits of flesh. That was good. More of that, but make it even more vile, like how it is in the Moonbase and Tomb of the Cybermen, because it looks disgusting. And that's what the Cybermen should be about there. These disgusting versions of ourselves, completely removed from humanity, and just, if we still had our emotions, we would go insane about how horrible it is. That's the idea, that's the point of the Cybermen, and that's where so many stories go wrong. So the final point is, rather than something that should be implemented, is something that should be avoided. Don't make the Cybermen look pathetic. There's so many stories which do this. The worst examples being Attack of the Cybermen, where they're killed by guns and it looks stupid. And also, I think the worst offender has to be Army of Ghosts / Doomsday, when they can't even manage to kill a single Dalek, while 4 Daleks manage to absolutely annihilate a huge army of Cybermen. It just makes them look weak and pathetic and removes the fear factor that the Cybermen are meant to have. And I wish we could see a proper Daleks versus Cybermen fight with, some proper Cybermen to really show, that the Cybermen aren't a force to be messed with, even by the Daleks. Because Doomsday just made the Cybermen look absolutely pathetic and really diminishes their fear factor in Doctor Who. So I think that's enough points for today, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and perhaps it's even enlightened you on what makes the good Cybermen stories work really well, and what makes the bad Cybermen stories suffer a lot, and why they don't work, because that's the whole point of this, to kind of share my thoughts on how Doctor Who should work, because I don't think they're doing it right at the moment, by a long shot, and yeah, so I'm a big fan of the Cybermen. I just wish they'd be portrayed in this excellent way that I've just described more often, because it's a real shame. You've only got things like the Moonbase, the 10th Planet, Spare Parts, and perhaps the Silver Turk, which properly get across most of these things that I'm saying here. And it's a shame that such a villain with such scary potential has kind of been wasted. But Mark Platt understands them, and so hopefully he will be able to help other writers understand how to do it, so maybe we can have some more really good TV Cyberman stories. That's it for now, and I'll see you back next time in another video.